Okay, welcome to everybody. I think that we can start with a webinar, and I want to say just a few words to welcome everyone and thank you, a special thank you to my colleague Martina Topić for her work. I am Stefania Rominti. I am president of EUPRERA, which is the association that is organizing this webinar, and Martina is a very active member of our association and a prominent scholar. She manages the research network. She coordinates the Master Awards, which recognizes the best master thesis. You are students, but you should know also the importance of being part of a professional association. You know colleagues like I knew Martina, you share ideas, you can make a lot of activities, you can make exchanges. So being part of an association is very important for your professional growth. And EUPRERA welcomes scholars but also professionals. And EUPRERA is the European Association for Research and Education in the public relations field, and it is under the umbrella of education that EUPRERA today organizes this webinar to just learn how to write a master thesis and hopefully to take the prize in the future. So thank you for being here today and good work, and the floor is yours, Martina.
Okay, thank you very much for this lovely introduction. Like Stefania said, I'm Martina Topić. I'm from Leeds Beckett University, and I'll collaborate with EUPRERA quite a lot. So thank you all very much for attending today. And we have some excellent speakers, excellent students, and I've seen the content of questions, so I trust it will be a very good and helpful seminar. So I would like to introduce the speakers now. If they could be added. Yes, here they are. So I will let the speakers introduce themselves first in no particular order, just the way I see them on screen. So Ilaria.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. First of all, thank you for the opportunity. It's a pleasure to be here. Sorry, to introduce myself, I'm Ilaria Vetrone, a Cumming master student in strategic communication at University in Milan. And it has been such a very interesting field of study since it comprehends a multitude of subjects. And we spent 2 years with the help of professionals and a lot of international students as well. So I'm glad to be part of this webinar since I'm currently writing my master thesis. So just like the other colleagues connected here, I would like to have some more tips in order to face it in the best way possible.
Thank you. The next person I see on the screen is Daniel.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. My name is Daniel Ziegele. I'm a former student from Leeds University. I there pursued my master's in communication management in 2019, and I was the winner of the EUPRERA Theoretical Framework Award in 2020 with my thesis on work stress among communication professionals in Germany and the US. And after that, I continued to work at Leeds University. I'm currently a research associate and PhD student and about to finish my dissertation on quality of communication consulting.
Okay, thank you. Arya?
Hello everyone, thank you for having me here. I'm Arya Dhamorekar, a current student at the University of Stirling. And I'm really looking forward to asking you guys some questions from very basic to something that can actually help us structure our dissertation in a way that may help us achieve an award in future. So really looking forward to this webinar.
Okay, thank you. And last but not least, Anne.
Hi, afternoon everybody. Thank you for having me. My name is Anne Cumming. I did my master's degree at the University of Stirling, and I am now currently employed there as the Business Engagement and Communications Coordinator. And I won the award for Theoretical Impact back in, just last year, 2022. So thank you for having me. Hopefully I can be of some help.
Thank you. So just to get started, I'll just ask a question to our previous winners each. So did MA Thesis Award help you in your career or personally? Daniel?
Yeah, I think for my career path, it's quite obvious because it helped me to get the PhD position. here in Leipzig with Professor Zerfas, and it also helped me to get the first kind of network with really the top scholars of EUPRERA, because I received the award in 2020, but actually received it in 2021 because the EUPRERA had to be cancelled in 2020, unfortunately. And we all met in Pamplona, and I could get connected to Ángeles Moreno, the former president, and also Alex Buman, who was the former committee head for the award, but also met Martina on a virtual screen. And so this is really a good starting point when you are planning to stay in academia, but also just in general, because it's like the special proof that you really have received good work with your thesis, which is like the final step within your university career.
Okay, Anne, the same question?
I would agree. I think actually attending the EUPRERA conference and hearing from these experts in the field, whether professionals or academics themselves, was really useful and beneficial. I think in regards to how it's helped my career, it's opened up doors, certainly. I've spoken with Sky TV, I've worked with networking groups with them, coming in and kind of going over my findings, which they have then implemented in some of their internal comms and storytelling. So it's been really useful. There's kind of networks for the future, for my future career progression.
Okay, thank you. I'm sure EUPRERA will be very, very pleased to hear that. So now the most exciting part of the seminar, of the webinar, is Ilaria and then Aria will be interviewing Daniel and Anne and asking them about what makes a good master thesis. So hopefully some of the current students can learn a little bit about that. I've seen questions beforehand. Yeah, very, very interesting. So Ilaria, I'll start with you so you can ask your question.
Great, thank you. So first of all, congrats guys for your award. It is always fulfilling to know that there are such young students and associations also that recognize those talents and incentivize them. So my first question would be an overall review and experience with EUPRERA, so starting from the application to the award ceremony, and in your opinion, which elements made you emerge from the other students?
Yeah, maybe I can just start, because I feel that this question is not easy to answer, because we were obviously not on the committee, but what I really appreciated was the opportunity to go back to the thesis like a couple of months after I handed it in and could review my own work. And so I think what was most helpful for me is really to go through my work and highlight what were the strengths, what were the weaknesses, because I think knowing the weaknesses of your own work helps you also to carry out the results and highlight what is the most important thing. And I think this, in terms of such an award, is always helpful to show a good understanding of your work and also how a scientific work works. And other than that, I can just say that it's up to the of course, committee or jury of the award, because as far as I know from all the contributions that I saw in the last years, is that it's all great theses, and so it might be minor differences or preferences, but knowing the strengths and weaknesses is really one point that I think is good to show off against other competitors.
Thank you.
Yeah, so for myself, first of all, I enjoyed the experience from start to finish with the applying for this. My lecturer had recommended that I put my thesis forward, and like Daniel said, it was going back to the work. So I'd submitted in the September my thesis, but came back to it kind of at the start of the year to put this forward. And again, it's knowing your limitations. Where was it limited? Where were your strengths and weaknesses? And I think, as Daniel said, I don't know exactly what made mine stand out from other candidates, but I think possibly the fact that I was including race and ethnicity within the field, which is really studied, is potentially a reason why. But I think attending the conference, listening to the current research that is going on really feeds into your ideas. So hopefully if you take part in this process, really make the most of, if you can attend in person, do, because the networks are invaluable.
Okay, great, thank you. So the second question would be, which was the inspiration thesis and which crucial points helped you out with the writing?
Who wants to answer first? Is it Daniel again or Anne?
Shall I go first this time? We'll mix it up a little. So for me, source of inspiration, even from my undergraduate degree in politics, I've had an interest in social movements, contentious politics. So social justice has always been kind of forefront in my mind for research. But on a personal note, I have a real love of different mediums within film and media. So I read a book by Katie Borum, formerly Katie Borum Chatu, and it was Story Movements and How Documentaries Empower People and Inspire Social Change. And I think that it was that book, it had just been released, I think, a month before I was looking at starting my thesis. And that really sparked an idea of how counter-narratives and storytelling can be used within PR through kind of social justice documentaries. So I would say certainly Katie Borum, she's fantastic. She works at the Centre for Media and Social Impact in Washington, DC. So if anybody has any interest in that area, I would certainly say look her up on LinkedIn, etc.
Okay, Daniel?
Yeah, for me, I probably have to explain a little bit of my educational background, because after like the first 3 semesters in the master's program, I went to the University of Georgia in the US for spending a semester abroad and helped them with carrying out the North American Communication Monitor, which is like one part of the European Communication Monitor family. And in this year, they had included work stress as one factor. And these results were like really getting my attention, because the results were huge. Like the percentages of professionals worldwide who were perceiving stress and were not able to cope with the stress were so high. And so this was my source of inspiration, that I said, there's no literature about it. So there's a real research gap, not only for theory, but also for practice, because obviously those practitioners don't know how to help themselves. And so I raised the question, like, how can I understand that in a more in-depth way? And so I started doing interviews on that topic. And what really helped me was really having 2 great supervisors, not only in Leipzig, but also at the University of Georgia with Ansgar Zerfas and Yuan Meng. And they both helped me like along the way. They always motivated me when it was harder. They helped me to find the right interview persons, connect me with people. So a master thesis, like in the first place, seems to like an individual project that you have to carry out yourself, but getting partners along that way was really helpful for myself.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That's very interesting. Yuan Meng is actually also a very active member of EUPRERA, including networks. So would you like to ask 2 questions to our speakers now?
Maybe Aria.
Yeah,
I'll go. Yes, so I'll go next. You guys did mention that you had interest in certain topic areas before starting your dissertation. So now that brings me to a very important but a very basic question. How did you choose your research topic? Because our supervisors keep telling us that you have to be very specific about your topic. And we have these ideas in our head that, we can do this, we can do that. But how do you really, pinpoint that this is what I want to do? And how did you structure it?
Yeah, so that's basically 2 very important questions. The first about how to find a topic, and the second one, how to structure a topic. I think with how to find a topic, it's really helpful to like get yourself an interest area. So obviously you maybe are more interested from your personal interest in one area than another. For my side, it's, for example, that I'm really interested in the service provider side of communication management. So back then with PR agencies, now with communication consultants, and then get yourself maybe an overview about the literature. And then if you find those research gaps, that's most helpful to find these specific points of interest or research gaps where you can connect your research with specific questions. Because if you stay on that overall level, so I could have said, like, I'm interested in PR agencies, and so like, okay, what's the current state of work in PR agencies? Then that would be really hard to find something out, because there's obviously a lot going on there. But I was going into the research part and found that, like, specifically this work stress element was not researched at all. And so it's kind of this connection of area of interest and then also, like, what does research already know about? So it's some kind of literature work. And the second part with how to structure it, I think for myself, it was clear, like, what's the research gap or what's the kind of relevance of the topic. But I also always kept in mind what could be potential results. So not in terms of specific results, but what's like the overall picture at the very end of the way. And if you have your motivation at the beginning and like your motivation at the end, you can connect those two and get along that side with this typical structure of going through the literature, building up a stable and steady methodology, bring out your results in an interesting way, and so on. And I think this is also always important to keep in mind why you're doing that and what could be potential results.
Yeah, so for me, I should probably say that my topic was how can racial justice documentaries be used as a PR tool? And it was a case study of Ava DuVernay's When They See Us. And so from that, I think how I chose it and the advice that I would give somebody in choosing a topic is the same. It's passion, but again, finding those gaps in the literature. So although a master thesis is not nearly as nearly as much of a time investment as a PhD, it still needs to be a labor of love. You're going to be spending a condensed period of time, certainly in a one-year master program. There's a lot of pressure to contend with. So I think it's having that passion for it so that you don't become kind of overwhelmed with the bigger picture and lose your focus on where you're at that point. Yeah, I think it's finding those gaps and tying that in with your passion.
I love this labor of love.
Labor of love.
I hope it sticks. I hope it sticks and ends up on Twitter. I'm certainly posting later.
Thank you.
Avia, sorry, please continue.
Yeah, now that brings me to my follow-up question. So once you have chosen your topic, how do you really strike a balance between, say, the depth and the breadth of your research? Like, how is it, you get confused at times that this is what I want to do and there's just so much, but you can only condense it within a set of words. So how do you really do that?
Well, for me, striking a balance, I'm not going to lie, it was quite hard. So I think if I'm looking at my work now critically, looking back on it, I think I probably slightly overstretched myself on some of the kind of research methods that I was using, and incorporating critical discourse analysis using visual elements as well as the text and music and lyrics. However, I do believe if I hadn't used them, the impact wouldn't have been as good. So it's very hard. Tips for maintaining your focus, though. Certainly for me, it was separating out each section. Don't worry about at the start. Don't worry about the end result, because if you're looking at that bigger picture, that final thesis, you can become distracted from each stage that you're at. So concentrating on each stage was really important for me. So it's planning your time, basic things, common sense, like switching off your phone, but also making time for yourself, and don't be too hard on yourself if you're not in a productive headspace.
Daniel?
Yeah, I would also agree that like now, after having finished the thesis, you could easily say, yeah, I managed that perfectly. But indeed, it was that I also made mistakes in that area, because I did a lot of interviews. So I had way too much results for the space I had. So for us, it's like a maximum of 100 pages. Which seems to be a lot, but when you're in the writing and you're really focused on your topic, this space is gone quite fast. So what helped me was that I spent a lot of time at the beginning to just build my structure. So I worked for like 2 or 3 weeks just to draft a structure. Like, this would be the intro. What chapters do I have in the theoretical background? What do I have to do for the methodology? How much pages can I spend on the results for discussion, and so on. And so within the progress, even if I went further and further within literature and found something interesting here and something interesting there, I reminded myself that, okay, you only have like 25 pages for this, so you have to focus on what is really essential and not all the things that seem to be interesting for your personal interests. So I think what was good is that my supervisors again reminded me that I should always also try to change the perspective, not only from my perspective as a writer of the thesis, but also sometimes step into the perspective of the recipient, of the reader of the thesis. And when you are reading your own stuff from the perspective as, for example, your supervisor or an audience, or maybe you even can like switch to a EUPRERA researcher and guess what they would be saying if they read it. That can help you maintaining the focus. But other than that, I would also recommend like getting yourself some time off, because sometimes you just have to think about all of that. And so a lot of my like co-students and friends with whom I did the master thesis, they did not do like weekends, because they said like, I need that time. And for me, it was always Saturdays and Sundays are off, and Mondays from Friday I work harder. And this is also just a personal way, but I think you shouldn't spend like 24/7 with your thesis, because sometimes you just have to rearrange stuff in your head while not sitting in front of your papers.
Okay, thank you very much. Ilaria, do you want to ask further questions now from our speakers?
Yes, related to the previous question, do you have like any tools in order to face the first steps of the writing? Or
so
as well?
Not really like tools, because like the main tool was my structure or my table of contents, but that's also just typed down in Word. And other than that, I always use these to-do lists that are always implemented in the phone. So, for example, I have split it down in really small tasks, like for this Monday, I want to read this paper, and I want to think about the headline of the introduction. And after that, I want to go to the library and get this book. So I really try to break down with help of to-do lists, like the big task, like getting your theoretical background, literature review part, breaking it down in as little like steps or tasks as possible. Mm-hmm. So I, for myself, had this like small successes that I could do, like the checks in the boxes, like I have done this, this, and this. And so it always tries to, or I always try to motivate myself through like the little steps, and then the big steps doesn't seem so big anymore.
Yeah, I would agree with Daniel there. It's about having those little successes to tick off, really do help motivate you. I think kind of tips or tools for the process, certainly for me, it helped to build on experience that I'd already gained potentially in my undergrad, or if you've completed another master thesis, and building and developing on them. So for me, it was developing my interview skills and utilising tools such as NVivo, which I hadn't utilised in my undergrad. Don't know why I hadn't. It made life a lot easier. But it was just, I think the most important thing for me was knowing the importance of my supervisor and spending the time that I had allocated with them, which is very limited, but making the most of the time with your supervisor. So even if you feel you haven't made progress and you're going to have nothing to talk about, you always do, and you can thrash out some of your thoughts. And although they can input in, sometimes just being able to get that out can really help align your thoughts. And again, as Daniel said, having a plan. I actually just looked out mine last night. I was looking at it again. I had kind of color coded, and it worked for me. And I think you have to do what certainly works for you. But one thing I would say is I definitely allocated a large chunk of time for the kind of conclusion and the editing. The final editing for me was really important, just to make sure that flowed through and everything came together. So I think I actually allocated for the conclusion and the editing about 3 or 4 weeks actually of my time, not the full 3 or 4 weeks, but that kind of time period. So I'd certainly say give yourself a decent chunk of time for your editing and conclusion.
Okay, great insights. My other question would be, as your thesis turned out to be useful or related to your current work experience, and if yes, in which way?
Daniel, do you want to answer now first, so we mix it?
All right. Yeah, a hard question again, because I think it's useful in so many ways. Because first, it obviously helps you just to learn so much about your working style, about what is interesting and what you like and don't like. It's also helpful in just skills like doing research, doing interviews, writing in a scientific way. But like for me specifically, because you asked about the current work experience, it turned out to be super helpful, because I was also able to do like a follow-up and wrote a paper for the EUPRERA, and we also received the EUPRERA Best Paper Award with this, and were like included in the Journal of Communication Management. So this was also my first publication, and every publication is like very useful and worthy when you're in the scientific world. So this was like my first steps in the scientific career.
Yeah, and for me, going into my business engagement and communications role at the university, I have implemented, since starting, I was seconded onto doing some specific campaigns for improving graduate outcomes, specifically working with care experienced students. So those that have been in care or adopted, fostered, etc. So it was about widening participation. So again, researching and looking into justice and EDI, and how Ava used these persuasive techniques through the documentary and the storytelling in that way, how they can be transferred across into actually the university environment and how we communicate with students. I find that really beneficial. So I actually got, physical things that I could use with using counter storytelling and all the different persuasive techniques that she used. So it's been very practically helpful in the creation of those campaigns at the University of Stirling. Yeah.
Okay. Aria, you have some questions as well?
Yes, this would be a bit individual based, but what according to you has been the most important factor that contributed to the success of your thesis? And my follow-up for this would be anything that you wish you had known beforehand, like before you started researching and you wrote your thesis, anything that you think would have been useful for you?
Shall I go first this time? Yeah. Oh, goodness. What do I wish that I had known beforehand? I think I probably knew this, but I hadn't I wasn't consciously thinking about it, but everybody produces work differently, everybody learns differently, and I think you can become it can cause worry or panic if you consider how other people are learning. For me, I had to read widely. I was reading and note-taking and color coding before any content was actually put together. And I think I sent panic through a number of my lecturers and friends and family and other fellow students. But for me, that's how I worked. And it's understanding how you work is so important, and not allowing the pressure of seeing somebody being chapters ahead of you. So certainly don't allow panic to set in, and accept that this is the way you learn and produce work effectively. Sorry, what was the other part to that question there, Aria?
What contributed the most to your success?
I think, oh goodness, that's so hard. I think you'll have to come back to me on that one. I'll let Daniel go.
I would say it's the same answer to both parts of the questions, and it's for me definitely the sample, because I was very ambitious with the sample, because I did a comparison between Germany and US, but also I want to compare young and senior professionals. So I had this 10 people in this group, 10 in this group, so overall 4 groups with 10 each. And I also wanted equal gender in every group. And I was like, yeah, of course, because this is the perfect design to cover as many perspectives as possible. And as the thesis was the most important topic for myself during that time, I obviously thought that everyone wanted to talk with me about that. And it was really hard to find people in each group, and for different reasons. Because, for example, on the senior management level, it's even or still, unfortunately, very hard to find enough female CEOs in agencies, because there are just not so many. And the other problem was that many junior professionals do not want to talk with you about work stress, because they fear if they have like this appointment in their calendar, that this will be a negative aspect for their next promotion or something. So they do not want to talk that open about work stress. And these were just elements I haven't planned or haven't expected, because I was just so motivated and for like everyone wants to talk about this important topic with me. So maybe here's my advice, or something I would have known before, is that you shouldn't be over ambitious and stay realistic with what is necessary, because it's more like, when do you have this degree of theoretical knowledge, when do you have like enough answers to answer a research question, and what is just like for the numbers. And from that perspective, I would definitely had planned my sample a little bit different and also more realistic. And like in general, one could say like, that you just have to be realistic of how important this thesis for yourself and how much time it consumes for yourself, but also what is the point of relevance for others exactly, or especially for everyone who you need to answer your research questions or your questionnaire, survey, interview, whatever.
Anne, do you want to add something maybe?
I think, again, it was the interview process. I would say that I hadn't anticipated how time consuming that process is. So it would be just reiterating exactly what Daniel has been commenting on there.
Okay. I have actually 2 questions as well for our speakers. So Daniel, you are now in academia, and you haven't just done a bachelor and master degree, you are doing a PhD. And you are assessing students because you work at the communications department. So what is, in your opinion, a difference between BA and an MA degree?
Yeah, that's a question that I also ask myself quite often, because I supervise bachelor's thesis, but not master's thesis. But I wrote myself one a couple of years ago. And I think that there are not so many differences, because the criteria for good scientific work should always be the same. Like there should be a good foundation on theoretical work. There should a question that addresses a research gap with relevance. There should a methodology that is fitting and also well built, and the results should be presented in an interesting way. But the only major difference, I think, is the contribution, because when I've reviewed the bachelor's thesis that I receive, they're often very well constructed and also built, but in terms of the results, it's more just like a training. So they can prove that they can work scientifically, but with the master's thesis, I felt that I really had the opportunity to have a real outcome that I could present to others, that I could show to others, that I could talk about with others. And I think the main difference is that you should find something more innovative and not just replicate something and do it from different angles. So innovative topics are more for the master theses, and if you want to like test something or look on one specific aspect of a topic that has been researched quite some times, this is probably better for the bachelor's thesis. But other than that, I think the criteria for a good scientific work are quite identical.
Okay, that's very interesting. And Anne, you studied as a mature student, so do you have any tips to share for other mature students? Because
yes,
that's
some others listening. Absolutely. I think for me, as a mature student, for me, it was a career change, and also due to personal circumstances, up until my mid to late 30s, it just wasn't doable with family and children. So I think the most important thing is to remind yourself that it's your time, that you are doing this for you, and so do invest in that and understand the importance of it, and don't let anybody else kind of impact that. So again, it goes back to your planning and your timeline. It's about allocating time separate away from your family life, so that you can have a good balance between the two. Because I certainly came across Alenka, my tutor, would laugh that everything happened during my year of doing the thesis. There was appendectomies, car crashes, childcare, the whole lot. And then if you put on top of that any academic obstacles or challenges that you come across, it can become quite overwhelming. So I think tips for any mature students, whatever their kind of family life is, allocating time for yourself, but understanding that well, for me personally, I found the whole experience of the thesis and the EUPRERA Award so rewarding, because it kind of gave me my own identity back as a woman and researching instead of just family and mother and wife, etc. So make sure you carve out time for doing this, because I think it's really important.
Okay, that's really interesting. We do have a question from the audience. Beatrice is asking two questions. One of them is, how did you manage to define your research questions? So I don't know who wants to go first. Shall we go with Daniel this time?
Yeah, that's also a good question. I think the most important thing for me was that it's related to also the research gap, so that the research question really shows what you're working on and also what your contribution will be at the end. So I was making sure also with going back and forth through my literature and also through what I planned to show off in the results, that I have included all the important elements, all the important construct that I have had to find in the beginning. And I feel that research questions do not have to be over complicated. They do not have to be too fancy. They really should focus on the most important aspects and should make clear what is, and this also kind of comes back to what I said at the beginning. It should also highlight what the contribution of the work is and what it's not. So it should not make false expectations, for example. Mm-hmm. And so the first question with, is there a minimum number? I think the minimum number is one research question. But it shouldn't be like 10 research questions, because then you will lose focus within the process.
Okay, Anne, would you like to add something?
Yeah, absolutely. I think absolutely right for myself. There was 3 research questions, but that's because it fitted what I was trying to accomplish. But I think, as Daniel said, the simplicity of them, not overcomplicating, is extremely important, and feeding into each other, so that when you come to the end, that impact, what you're trying to show, is clear. And for mine, they all fed into each other and created my overall findings. So yeah, I agree with Daniel, don't overcomplicate things, and reading widely at the start for your lit review will really help to find those gaps and really hone in on what you're looking to uncover and present.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other questions from the audience, maybe? While we wait, Ilaria, you had an extra question for Daniel. You're interested in his work, if you would like to ask.
I have a personal curiosity, actually, because I saw from your bio that you teach trends and tools for corporate communication. So would you mind telling us more about it?
So sorry, I couldn't hear like the full question. What was the end of the question?
Like if you would tell us more about the actual trends and tools that you use for your work.
Yeah.
So concerning corporate and startup communication. So what you're actually doing. Yeah.
Okay, so when I started as a research associate after graduation at the university, we developed like a methodology to identify trends in like communication management, corporate communication. And it's basically like a trend research process. Yes, like from different areas. So we look on areas like technology, management, or society. And from these debates in these areas, we have a 2-step methodology where we systematically review literature and then discuss with like an expert group, and then try to connect and show how these topics or these trends could influence the work of communication officers in corporations. And what I do in my teaching now in the bachelor's and master's level is that we teach that methodology, and students in their specific projects, they can like try to identify topics as well. And also these trend reports are a good starting point for eventually finding a research topic. They are mostly new, that one cannot like really build on existing literature, but they are a good source of inspiration. So we have that here in Leipzig, that more and more people are also taking those trend topics into consideration. And the other part is startup communication, because we have like a startup center here at our university, and we are collaborating with them and also doing like several research projects where we just look how communication departments institutionalize in startups. So these are 2 more of research and practical courses where we not try to give knowledge, but more like taking our students with ourselves on the journey to find more about it in kind of research projects or practical workshops.
Interesting.
Okay, we haven't got any more questions coming yet. If anybody would like to ask something, please put in the comment box, and our speakers will happily answer. You had another question, didn't you, Ilaria?
Yes, but actually Daniel already replied to it. But I have an extra question that would be, which are like your future ambitions and goals? So as a work experience or in life in general?
So as I said, my dissertation or a PhD project is about quality in or for communication consulting, which I find is also a very interesting field of practice. And there's not so much research and also not education, because the most programs I know from Germany, but also in Europe, they do not really educate for being a consultant and like give advice and recommendations to other organizations on communication. So like two ambitions or visions that I have. So the first thing is that I also like to work in consultancy and probably start my own business after the PhD. But also I want to continue working on teaching students the methods and tools, how to consult and how to analyze and plan and structure communication aligned with management, because this is also something that we really focus on here, that communication is always aligned with the overall success of organizations.
What about you, Anne? Do you have anything to add? What are you planning for the future? You muted. Muted.
Apologies. Yes. So for myself, it's certainly staying within higher education. I'm very early in my career for being an older person. So certainly staying within that area, but hopefully moving from careers into kind of more of the EDI within the university's setting. Again, working within the communications and hopefully bringing these stories and using the storytelling skills that I've learned through the course of my master thesis. So yeah, that would be University of Stirling is a great place. So hopefully I will be there for many more years to come. But that would be myself.
Okay, for those participants who are watching us elsewhere, EDI means Equality, Diversity and Inclusion.
Apologies, yes.
Acronym used in the UK. I realized only recently that not everybody knows.
Thank you.
I have a question here. So you guys spoke about your career aspirations that you have. Now in context with, again, coming back to writing a thesis, it so happens that you know that one particular topic is going to be useful for your career in future, but you do have interest in something that is probably not directly connected to what you aim to do in your future. So how do you again, decide which one do I choose for conducting my research and then completing my dissertation? Any advice you would like to give on this aspect?
So from my experience, sometimes it's also useful to detach from your personal interest or your career aspiration, because with your thesis you can show off that you're able to work scientifically and that you're able to manage such a big and important project. And with everyone that I was talking about, it's not so much about what the topic was, but more like that you did it. So in terms of the scientific master thesis, it's absolutely fine if you choose a important and also interesting topic from a scientific or research point of view, which is not yet connected with the area of practice that you see yourself probably in the future, because they will be more looking for the skills in managing a project like this and doing the research on that. Because also in our university, people are writing their theses on the most diverse topics, and they're ending up somewhere completely different. And what always helped them is the skill of how to do research, how to structure, how to manage a project, how to stay self-organized through the process. Mm-hmm. But it's not so decisive if the topic was in this specific area. So just because someone wrote their thesis, for example, in our university, we have field of financial communication, they are not all ending up as investor relations managers, but some of them are becoming CSR and sustainability managers. Some of them are going to agencies. Some of them are going to be media managers or going to like public TV stations and so on. So I think after a thesis, the doors are open in every way you want to have.
Yeah, it's the wider skill set that you gain from it. Although I have said that, you know, I'm slightly within my area of where my thesis was, you know, I'm not going to be creating documentaries at the university, but it's having your passion for your topic. But again, you can do something else. You can do a topic that isn't related to your career aspirations. As Daniel said, it's those wider skills, your time management, your planning, how you can write, how you can produce papers. All of these can diffuse into many different areas. So just accomplishing what you will accomplish at the end of your time at university and with that thesis will open doors for you.
Okay, we are approaching the end of the webinar and we don't have any further questions. Is there anything our speakers would like to add at the end? Maybe something that wasn't asked and you think it's relevant to share?
Yeah, maybe I have a question, because we talked so much about our research and our thesis, but you are now the ones who are next with doing your research, and I'm really looking forward to hear about your theses, and maybe not just like in a year or two at the EUPRERA Award ceremony, but maybe you can tell us what your ideas or what your current thesis aspirations are.
Good question.
Ilaria, would you like to start?
Yeah, I mean, I'm at the initial phase of my writing. So my topic would be startup accelerators. And so I actually have to understand the various incentives that, for example, the state or private entities give to people in Italy and in the US. So I have to do a research on it and then try to find what's the best tool. And yeah, because we actually did a course about startup where we had to do a project and to show our idea about a startup. So I like that a lot. And so the idea came from that.
Okay, that's interesting. Aria?
Again, even I'm at the very initial phase where I just submitted my proposal, and my focus is going to be on transmedia storytelling and how is it helping people create personal brands. So I am aiming to target 3 influential personalities in different areas like politics, in media, and in business, and figure out how they are using transmedia storytelling platforms to create their personal brands. So that's the initial plan, and yeah.
We'll see where you end up with when you complete your research, but it's very linked to Anne's work. I can see Anne's slides already.
I'll send you some links.
I am definitely connecting with you after that.
Yeah.
Okay. I think we came to an end. Thank you all for a lovely webinar and all your questions and answers. I learned a lot as well from your different perspectives. And thanks everyone who watched or will be watching on YouTube later on.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was lovely meeting all of you.